You're about to hear fragments of a conversation between Christopher Beanland and Iain Sinclair. Iain Sinclair is a poet, writer and thinker, fragment and author of books such as Down River, Ghost Milk, 3, London Overground, and Hackney, That Rose Red Empire. He's also made films like London Orbital, Chris Pettit, 6, and Swandown. Fragment 7. Fragments of a conversation. Fragment 8. Between Chris Beanland and Iain Sinclair. 9. This voyage took place 10 through the wildernesses of Woolwich in southeast London. Fragment 1.
That's a good. Looks like a slice of old dog stuck on top there. Here's the Silvertown airport.
I'm not sure if this is the best time to start.
Oh,
we've got a plane flying over to London City Airport.
That's good. It's very Ballardian.
It is very, isn't it? And
Ballardian.
And very Ballardian. And as Iain says, the top of the microphone.
It absolutely looks like you've got a handful of dog and stuffed it on top of an electric razor.
It looks like a handful of dog on top of an electric razor. I couldn't have.
Or else a very, very hairy person who shaved their chest and it's stuck.
It's actually my hair.
Oh.
That's not true. But yeah, I'm here with the laureate of London Fields, Iain Sinclair. Welcome to Woolwich. We are walking along the Thames path, and we're on our way to Gallions Park, aren't we, Iain?
We're on our way to Gallions Reach Park.
Gallions Reach Park.
With the idea that we may never find it.
Yeah.
Because we've been detoured.
We'll see.
To the ghosts of armaments and the kind of colonialism of the 19th century destruction of the world in Woolwich.
Yeah.
Combined with statues brought back from ancient Egypt, which has succeeded in throwing our compasses as crazy as Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And so the park could reappear. It may never have been there. It may be a kind of Arthur Machen fantasy that I went to once and it can never be found again. Or it may emerge from these estates and tower blocks alongside the River Reach.
We'll have to.
There's a mile of dark history right opposite us. I mean, Gallions Reach was the site of the terrible tragedy of the Princess Alice excursion steamer being chopped in half by a collier vessel, the Bywell Castle. 600 odd drownings in 1878, just out there on the river. People couldn't swim, sewage being pumped out on both sides, horrible tragedy. And so the river is not to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And you can't move without the notion that you're on top of contaminated land.
All the land here has so much history, and the river too, flowing past us on the left. And this is the point where the river gets very wide as well, doesn't it, Iain? You can.
Yeah, it certainly begins to open out into the world in the estuary, and also opens out into layers and layers and layers of new development and regeneration, and the idea of how you can use places, things like the Elizabeth line, to create new cities, basically.
Yeah.
Without there being necessarily people to put in them.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what we've passed, there's nobody there.
There was no one there. So we were walking.
It's like a plague city.
It was very, 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 very strange. It was almost like
burnt
lockdown.
grass.
Yeah.
Semicircles of buildings.
Yeah, we've got these
balconated bicycles, but not a single human.
No, there's not many people around. Iain, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I can see something over there which looks like.
That is one of the mounds.
That looks
we're
like
in the
a
right
mound.
place.
We're in the right place. We found it.
We're there. Yeah, no, we'll find it.
But we've
build the mounds and they'll come.
But we've been on this walk, which is very interesting, through these liminal landscapes. We've seen newspapers and.
Yes.
And you were talking to me about when you were looking at the detritus on the ground and the stories that it can tell.
Reading the contour lines.
Reading the contour lines. Yeah.
Cars gives you a very good idea of where you are.
Yeah.
And then the sudden ambience out of the retail parks of the most high security prison in Britain, HM prison Belmarsh, which has got Julian Assange in it still, and played host to Jeffrey Archer for a few weeks. He was only in there 3 weeks, and he managed
Was
to
he selling
publish
tickets?
prison diaries. I mean, talk about Che Guevara, you know. Got nothing on Jeffrey. And various other kind of interesting
Wasn't
people.
that it was a bit high security for Jeffrey, wasn't it?
Well, it was just, I think, you know, a gesture, so to give him material for the book, and then he can go to an open prison and have time to write it.
Yeah.
And come out ahead of the game.
And we noticed, didn't we, Ian, that right next to Belmarsh there was this new housing development, which was extolling its virtues on the advertising boards in the way that they often do these days. But yeah, no mention of the fact that you're basically living right next to Britain's most dangerous men.
no mention of that. It's always like, this is the future,
Yeah.
planning for tomorrow, considerate constructions, whatever. You know, you manipulate, you laminate history so that it just gives it a very thin thread of history passes through with all the dark stuff buried. But what was really intriguing, just hanging around outside the new station in Woolwich, was finding this dark Egyptian god, because it was a mangled god. It didn't look like any Egyptian god that I recognised. It looked like it had literally been ripped out of the ground 2 weeks ago, covered in sort of black mould. And it's just the same relation from the city of Cairo to the pyramid complex. So here we are, we've been in the city with the old Egyptian gods, and suddenly out we come into this field where there are the equivalents of the English pyramids.
Yeah.
And what it is, it's the residue of this compulsion to dig and excavate. So you've got tons of soil produced by the Channel Tunnel, the years and years of crossrail development, and all of these are essentially the developments of tearing down aspects of the old Royal Woolwich Arsenal, and what you do with it. And what they've done with it here is create this rather mysterious park, which we're just about to enter.
We're about to enter. The idea of the mounds reminds me a little of in Berlin after the war, where they were building up their own parks, like Teufelsberg and Volkspark Friedrichshain, and those other things. They look like hills, but they're
So
actually.
here we are, there's a
there's
little
a map here.
of Gallions Reach Park.
Right.
This is the essential. This is your Silbury Hill. This is the key one, which is a helical path, weaving you like a meditation to the very top, which is the viewing platform, whereby you relate to the whole spectrum of London, east, west, south, north, everything. And there's a series of smaller mounds around, including Lookout Hill and a group of three, and one again with a helical path. What the meaning of it is obscure. It was opened in January 2017, offering a new natural habitat environment with wildflower meadows, 800 new trees, black poplar, white poplar, hornbeam, silver birch, ash, turkey oak. So it's an aspect of Thamesmead. It's like on the edge of that development, and it's also playing into the older history of Woolwich. I'm afraid it's one thing that's brutally clear what this is. If you look at the outline, it's a gun carriage.
Oh,
it's absolutely
yes.
a gun carriage.
It's
a cannon.
It looks exactly
here is the wheel.
like
here is the
cannon.
This is the barrel. There's
completely.
no question that has been shaped.
Yeah.
It is a memorial to our glory,
exactly.
blowing the world apart.
I guess.
Can't be anything else.
Yeah, it really, really does look like that, doesn't it? Yeah.
So Gallions Hill is the kind of sleeping wheel on which all of this brutality exists.
Yeah.
It's turned into something that's ostensibly calm and meditative and laid out.
And here's something else you might. I don't know how you feel about this, Ian. I noticed that Thamesmead seems to have been rebranded. We've got some kind of new font and a logo. I don't know about you. I like the old Thamesmead brand with the kind of river.
They seem very keen to separate Thames from Mead. And I mean the marshes. What are the history of the marshes? In most recent times, it's been very much used by travellers, gypsies, as a place where you can keep the horses.
Yeah, and that's one of the surprises. If you come to Thamesmead, you see these horses just walking around this very super modernist landscape. It's surreal. Again, no people. You just see these horses and these massive blocks, which some being restored.
The marshes run on to places where Prisoners were sent out in the hulks back in the Victorian period, and there were fever hospitals in Dartford, the big fever hospitals that if you were sick of London were put on boats and brought up, and then there was a special railway line that ran from the river up to this isolated hospital with its fever courts where you looked out on the sunshine, kind of German fever courts. And it was quite a good hospital. You know, it worked.
Yeah.
And in the Thatcher period, they started to pull them apart. And in the Blair period, they went all together, and there were new hospitals built that were no good.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of situation we're in now. These brand new buildings that don't work instead of this.
Yeah.
And here we go, another nice plane coming over because we're on the flight path.
Here, we are literally right under this. It's I know my planes. Unfortunately, it's a Q400 Luxair. Coming in from Luxembourg.
Coming in from Luxembourg?
From Luxembourg, yeah.
Well, obviously money launderers.
Yes.
I mean, God,
that plane is full of
from
cash.
Luxembourg, people have just gone into their hedge funds and they're straight into the city.
There's no people on that plane. It's just a lot of euros stacked up.
Oh, brilliant.
Should we?
Okay,
let's walk on in. Ian, what do you think of these things? These are to stop motorcycles, right?
Yeah.
I think it's some kind of like magnet. But there's,
magnet.
I think there's a very, very strange. I've seen these in Thamesmead before. Two sort of barrier things, and I think it's a magnet to stop you maybe putting your motorcycle through.
Because it would be a very tempting landscape for motorcycles to go revving up these hills.
I think so.
Miles.
Exactly. I think a lot of people like to ride their motorbikes here. So this is not something you see in a lot of. Don't see this in Victoria Park, but.
I'm very happy to tap your expertise on planes from Luxembourg and motorcycles.
I don't know why.
The fence.
I don't know why I know these things.
Alongside us, this mesh fence does look very prison-like.
It does look like a. It does look
like a high security zone with who knows what on the other side.
What's on the? So what does it say? No access private land. So I wonder what land is over
obviously
there.
It's going to be developed.
Developed for housing
rapidly, and they don't. The park is so sort of abstracted in its beauty.
Yeah.
I came in quite early, and it was wonderful, really. I mean, just sort of empty avenues, nicely planted, no obvious activities.
Yeah.
A couple of picnicking people.
And Ian, you were saying that you stumbled on this park, didn't you?
Yeah,
you were
walking
in this area, and it just.
Well, what I decided when Elizabeth opened was I wanted to go to Abbey Wood on the instinct that if this line is going there, then there's got to be huge development around the back of it, which of course there was. It was development on top of development, because Thamesmead was a 1960s project that died horribly for various reasons, and then is being reimagined really with super slogans and the rest.
Yeah.
So I had a great time in Thamesmead and travelling back to the earlier socialist republics and the Corbusier buildings and all the rest of it, and I actually found a car that was covered in grass. It was wonderful. It's like a bubble car with a thick thatch of grass around it, and all kinds of gestural ecologies, and then hit the Thames path, and I was just making my way back to Woolwich, and I was going to walk back all the way in through Custom House and the rest, and suddenly I noticed this park, which I had been through before, years back, coming in the same direction, and none of it was here. It was just a strange little park, and now it's an artwork. It's a kind of neo-pagan religion that's growing up around the idea of being twinned with development, because you now extract vast quantities of earth, and what are you going to do with it? You make these artworks.
Yeah.
But I hadn't twigged till we looked at that diagram that what it is a sort of spiritual celebration of the canon.
Yes, it really does look like that, doesn't it? But yeah, as I was saying, it reminds me a little of Berlin, Teufelsberg. A lot of the rubble from the war then was made up into these mounds. It kind of makes me think of land art as well. Those giant
Smiths and it's got aspects of that.
Yeah.
or you're looking for some Ian Hamilton Finlay plaques, but you've got big sky. You've got fabulous sky. You've got great cloud panoramas, such as Luke Howard, the man who identified the different forms of clouds, saw in his London walks, mostly the other side of the river. So you could sit on these mounds and just watch the sky and go into a huge John Constable reverie and have a totally different sense of the world than anything that we got in walking here from Woolwich. Because we've been in little estates and on crazy retail parks beside roads thick with detritus chucked out of cars. Suddenly we're in this artwork park, which nobody is visiting.
Yes.
And we maybe ascend this first mound, which is just a little practice mound.
Let's do it. Let's go up the first one. But yeah, the clouds. It's a very picturesque kind of landscape now, isn't it?
They're burial mounds without anybody in it, as far as we know. They may become popular for that later. But what would be in it except the levels of contamination? You could actually bring a Geiger counter and get the readings here.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? A lot of things happened. A lot of industrial processes were happening down here, weren't they?
Dangerous. The ones of all the armaments were producing mega chemicals.
Yeah. Just climbing up this hill. It's a very surreal place, isn't it, Ian?
It's very. And what? I think you climb the first mound like this, then you get the sense of all the other ones. So you see you're in a kind of landscape of mounds, satellite mounds, small ones, babies, and that's the mother breast mound. That's the one that you're supposed to go to. That's the final one that gives you the killer view all round, which is what the trip's about.
It's kind of aping that glacial landscape that you can see sometimes in Scotland and places like that, isn't it? I believe. Are they called moulins, these things that you see
moraines?
Moraine, yeah.
Those, but they're obviously completely man-made. And unlike this, the mother mound is really very much a breast, because the top bit is, because of the paths, it looks like a kind of nippled bit at the top. And it doesn't have the conical aspect or a pyramidical aspect. It's not like a ziggurat or a Mexican one, a stepped pyramid. But it's in the general area, and it's the kind of notion that we're creating a new religion to go alongside the development. It's hand in glove with that, which is why I thought it was so fascinating, as against parks that are full of authentic history. Because if you talk about Victoria Park or something near where I live in Hackney, it's a people's history. There's a history of so many people did things in that park, as well as what the architecture of the park was. Here, you're getting. You could read the history of cigarette butts.
A few cigarettes on the floor.
Unlike Victoria Park, it hasn't got packages of the silver torpedoes, laughing gas things,
which you see everywhere.
Hipster stuff, which are thick. They're not here.
Yeah.
So the kind of people who come up here are more like a meditative smoke, a quick look round, and decide, are you going on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and so on. And then they're released. If we come along a little further, there's this Royal Avenue that actually doesn't go to anything, but it's like an avenue that should come to something noble and great. But it does line up with the Surrey Hills beyond and the water towers on the top. There's a kind of slight sense of ley lines and desire lines and a network of veins throbbing out from this place.
I
think there are new energies here which haven't yet been tapped.
I wonder who the people who...
Cult will follow.
Yes, exactly. Who's gonna come here and...
I think, because we were chatting earlier on about J.G. Ballard and...
We were indeed.
Millennial kingdoms and whatever, the sort of the spirituality of huge mega mall supermarkets, whatever. I can see a kind of a cult growing up here of people who come out onto these mounds under the flight path, wait till the Luxembourg flight is bringing in the dealers, and then whoosh.
It does have that aspect.
What are you channeling? Because you've got Belmarsh prison there.
Yeah, Belmarsh over there.
You've got
Thamesmead.
Thamesmead with its clockwork orange aspects alongside the lake. You've got a whole series of murders of people, racially initiated murders and criminality. Then on the other side you've got these huge sewage beds in Barking, and the Crossness sewage pumping station here. So one of the times I was walking down the path, the Thames path towards Dartford, we were stopped at Crossness, and there was a police across the river, and they wouldn't say what it was. And they absolutely refused to sell us. And then a little crowd built up because there were cyclists. And then eventually this guy had to give way and said it was a royal personage was coming. And then you could see on the ring road a kind of cavalcade of black limos and outriders. It was Prince Charles.
Prince Charles.
Turning up to reopen Crossness pumping station. I mean, that's the kind of weirdness of England.
Yeah.
That in this out of the way, complete place, they've decided to make the sewage cathedral the big selling point in Thamesmead legacy now. History begins in Thamesmead, and visit the museum of the sewage pumping station. Oh, yeah, great. It's not a museum for the people who were drowned when the pumping station was pumping its filth into the river.
Yes, indeed. There's something about the formality of this park which kind of reminds me a little of.
And see, I mean, we're in a formal park, where the mounds have been man-made.
Exactly,
shaped.
Everything's very, very man-made.
On the left, but behind this fence that we were denied access on private land, is a series of actually more interesting mounds that are just natural, have grown up on the detritus of buildings where bombs are being tested and being destroyed, and you can see bits and pieces of these old buildings in that landscape. But it's going to be a development.
Yeah.
And the land here is actually owned by the developer still, who's leased it out. And he's done this as a sort of a gesture, you know.
Yeah.
It's a bit of sort of cosmetic laundering for the development.
Yeah. Well, shall we step down here? And
it's fascinating, I must say.
It really is. Yeah. It's there's something about the formality that reminds me a little of Parc de la Villette in Paris. I don't know if you've ever been to that one with it's kind of.
Where is that?
It's on the site of the old abattoirs. On the
there you go.
The Canal de l'Ourcq in the east, and there's all these very strange kind of sculptures and lots of straight lines. It was a kind of.
What's curious here is there aren't any sculptures.
No.
Whereas outside the station or in any of the developed bits, it's thick with sculptures. As you come into Woolwich along the canal, the towpath, you have this group that look like Anthony Gormley's. They're not, but there's a kind of human group of naked figures standing there, and there's tons of that stuff. But here, what I like here is there's nothing.
Yeah.
They're just the mounds.
Yeah.
And they've resisted putting in these kind of over-egged statues which don't mean anything.
It's a very, very hot and sunny day, but there's very few people in the park.
It would be a really nice if you lived in these estates. It'd be quite a nice place to. There's not a lot of shade in the bits between the mounds, but there are tree-lined avenues. So you could find a nice patch of shade there.
Yeah, definitely. It's. You can see that. Well, you can see the design lines going up to the top of the mounds as well, can't you? People naturally love to climb up things, don't they?
Because I think this time, what happened when I came before, I went just straight up to the top of this mound, sideways, and I could see this figure of the other guy, the other walker, was circling slowly round. And I think that was probably the better way to do it. Then we coincided at the top. And then he gave me the history of everything. It was wonderful, to have someone who'd grown up here and seen the changes in the landscape. What
did he tell you about what had gone on here before?
Not much on this specific site. He just remembered it as variously as sort of waste ground and a little bit of a municipal park. But then beyond, you could see where Thamesmead is. He was talking about certain pubs where British National Party met, and they wouldn't let anybody else come in, and etc., etc. And then he just loved to walk through to Oxley's Wood, and Shooter's Hill, and follow the Greenway across.
Yes.
They've got a little play park for kids at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, going to a playground.
The the instruments of play actually do look like sculptures.
They do a little bit, don't they? Well, look at this, Iain. Royal Borough of Greenwich, our 2012 legacy, and you were writing quite a lot about the Olympics, weren't you? And
Unfortunately, yeah.
what was happening in Stratford during that point.
Not just in Stratford. So I shot up straight up there last time, but I think probably a good thing to find the start of the actual official park and wind our way up.
We'll wind our way up, definitely.
So then when I finished, I came straight down and I cut straight through this estate, which brought you straight out on Belmarsh.
Right.
And there were dozens and dozens of yellow ribbons protesting the imprisonment and torture, as they said, of Julian Assange, who's still waiting, I believe, to face extradition to the USA.
We're just passing some houses that look very almost.
So you've got a series of sort of cuts of direct paths.
Yeah, paths that you can go to
the top
of the
mound. There must be a point where
mound.
there's a sort of official access. It's not a big park. It's fairly token.
Yeah.
But possibly significant. Does it matter which side I stand?
Oh no, we've kind of changed sides.
Don't bother with that.
We've changed sides, but no, that's okay.
Sound people are always the most neurotic.
Yeah.
In my early experience of doing stuff, they were always half crazy. Like you had to stand in exactly where you stood before.
No,
I can always hear noise. Oh wait, stop!
There's a noise.
Stop.
Yeah.
Is it a plane? No. There's a caterpillar.
Well, a caterpillar. Yeah. I think the only issue today is it's a bit breezy, which
breezy.
is
good.
yeah.
Oh, you've got your dog hair.
You've
got your wig on.
The wig on the microphone is helping slightly, but yeah.
What do they call? There's a term for a pubic wig.
Like a merkin.
A merkin. That's the one. Yeah.
A microphone.
A microphone merkin.
We'll call it that from now on.
Foxglove
Path.
Crowfoot Path.
I love it when you go to these kind of these places and they're trying to ape the idea that they're in the countryside.
Well, they are, but it's a kind of strange hybrid countryside, like calling London Fields a wilderness garden when it's a bit of old red ash that's been specially chemically treated to come up with some poppies for a week.
Do you go to London Fields Park often?
I go through it every morning. Yeah, absolutely. Which is fascinating sociologically, just seeing the changes of what's been happening there over the years.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's a kind of exercise island. It's an open-air gym for humans and dogs.
Yeah.
And you can hear the thud of the boxing gloves and the grunting and the sound boxes. And there are people doing Pilates and whatever. Yeah. And then the bicycles is coming into the Lido, which would be you.
Exactly, that's me. Exactly, every day.
You go every day, yeah.
I do. Yes, I love my swim down there.
Yeah, I mean, so many people do. Obviously, it kind of starts. My neighbours do. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to get a slot in the summer.
Cotting's always in there.
Is Cotting there? I'll have to look out for it.
Always in there when he's in London.
Yeah. I feel he's not going to be unhappy that I've asked you to come on this podcast without him, is he?
Oh no! Oh God, no! God, we're not married.
I love the duo that you guys make in your films. You have a very good rapport, like in Swandown, and
I enjoy his energy and his madness, and his drive. There's an exhibition going on still for another 2 or 3 weeks, I think, in Sheep Lane, just off London Fields, with Andrew and his daughter Eden. And it's at the moment, I think, you've got the joint paintings they do together. You've got some sculptural heads, and you've got one of the films they made together. But the final thing is you can get this headset, VR, virtual reality headset, in which you take a trip around this farmhouse in the Pyrenees that's completely collapsed and run down, where he spends a lot of time with the summer. So it's absolutely amazing to experience. You sit in this thing, you move around, and you see the entire room around you, and then things in the room old photographs start to animate, and the film of Eden on the wall. I mean, really, really uncanny, amazing experience.
Yeah, that sounds
so I'd recommend that for anyone around London Field.
Very interesting.
So, okay, here we go, the official path.
We're going to go up the path, so we're going to start walking up the mound. I wanted to.
We'll be coming round in a sort of anti-clockwise, I guess.
In a circle, yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit about. While we're talking about cotting as well, about filmmaking, Iain, because a lot of I'm sure a lot of people will have read your books, but obviously your films.
More. See, I'll tell you this, because just of late, from being in Brussels, City of London, down in Hastings, people have started to stop me. So, are you?
Are you the guy from Swandown?
And I said, yeah. So, I love you. Have you read any books? Oh, no, not books. No, I haven't read any books. I've seen you in John Rogers' film. And then in Hastings. I saw Swandown. So, essentially, you kind of register as a minor eccentric in these films by John Rogers and Andrew Cotting, but nobody reads the books. That's gone. It's too much like hard work.
Yeah, I have the same thing, Iain. Like you can publish books and. But no one seems to read them. But as soon as you're on the radio or TV, everyone's I saw you on this.
That's the world.
But didn't read the book. But no, I think you. I mean,
I don't mind.
Yeah.
Except I don't want to be bothered to say how wonderful John Rogers.
But you've obviously collaborated with people like Cotting and Chris Pettit as well.
Yes,
I'm a very big Chris Pettit fan.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yeah, the stuff that
hopefully we're going to be collaborating again shortly.
Are you? What's that going to be?
I've just finished a kind of mega project about the photographer John Deakin, who was an associate of Bacon and took a lot of the photographs that Bacon used in his paintings of Henrietta Moraes and Lucian Freud and so on. So I got given a massive archive of Deakin photographs that had not been published or whatever. They were all kept in a Rochelle canteen in Arnold Circus. So I lived with these things, and I did this biggish book, which is a sort of cultural history from the margins of a guy who was a photographer, gay photographer, drunk, who was on the edge of this circle. And what I proposed when this was finished was that Chris and I would do a film just entirely based on the photographs, like Chris Marker's La Jetée, but making up a kind of our own myths and stories based on these photographs. And that's the starting point. Looks like we should be able to do it, because it's been really hard to... I'm just going to take a stone out of my shoe.
You should do, yeah. Let's perch for a minute, shall we?
You know, we haven't been able to get any money to do anything jointly for God knows how many years, 20 odd years or whatever.
Well, it's a shame as well. London Orbital was such a fascinating project that you guys did, and I love Radio 1 is one of my favourite films.
Wonderful film.
Chris's film. I mean, we were talking about Ballard earlier. That's really a homage to Ballard and to the kind of German New Wave. I'm such a fan of those films as well. And
it's a German film, isn't it? It's completely a German film that happens to be made in England.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Wim Wenders sort of production type film with his technical crew and everything, and Chris adapting that to an English landscape. I'm going
to Bristol next week, and whenever I do that journey, it always makes me think of Radio 1. But I think that the way that people like Wim Wenders and Chris and yourself show landscapes and show the city, it opens people's eyes to everything that's around them, and I think we need to look, right?
Oh, for sure. Well, we need to look and to explore and to be out here, just randomly get out there somewhere and nose about, because we're so addicted to the other forms of reality, and people, you just go Google Belmarsh, but that doesn't tell you really anything. You just have to be there. You have to experience it, and that's basically all.
Yeah.
And I think there was, like, from the mid-90s, there was a really interesting tradition with like Andrew Cotting's head-on Gallivant which also involved this beautiful story with his grandmother and his young daughter, who wasn't expected to live very long, and he goes on this pilgrimage around the edge of Britain, and Patrick Keeler, still images of London, like almost like Look at Life, then given this hugely ironic, cultivated European take on the top of it, which was a critique of society, very funny, and Pettit coming back to do film essays because he couldn't get the financing for feature films anymore, and all of that was going on at the same time, and lots of other people, and Ballard, of course, had been for years ahead, writing in very interesting ways about these landscapes and psychopathology of these landscapes, imagining Canary Wharf and aspects of that development years before it happened. Yeah, because he logically saw this is where it has to come next.
He saw where it came from, where it was going to come. Yeah, high rise was his kind of vision for what would be on the Isle of Dogs in the future. I was looking through some old notes and emails yesterday, Ian, and I saw that I'd been in conversation with Patrick Keeler. I was writing to him in 2014, and I was telling him that I'd been to see you talking at there was an old hospital in near Tower Hamlets Cemetery.
I know Beanland Hospital, which had been an asylum, really
exactly
asylum.
The asylum, yeah.
Figures in W.G. Sebald's Austerlitz, yeah.
Exactly. And you were talking about Patrick
Keeler, yeah.
Work there, and Patrick said he was very happy to hear that you'd been mentioning him. But I love his work as well, and I think the way that he shows, I love the way it's like radical looking, isn't it? It's very,
and it went crazy. In a sense, I think London was a perfect film for time and place, and I felt such a kinship with it because I was doing Lights Out for the Territory, as well. A series of actual London walks, and he has these imaginary, created London walks as beautiful essay forms in the film. And then Robinson in Space is almost unstoppable. I mean, it's the weight of fact and information and everything that goes into there. There's no way that journey could ever really end. Yeah. And then the final one, if the final one or the third one of the trilogy in Oxford, it's like a person who's become completely deranged because of the state of everything that he predicted or found from the earlier films. So it's kind of tragic and funny. Yeah.
The narrative running through it is hilarious as well.
It's mangled a bit for me by Vanessa Redgrave taking over the voicing from Paul Schofield.
Yes.
Paul Schofield had a perfect voice, even with strange diction for the original too. Yeah. Vanessa Redgrave was mangling things. I mean, she just wasn't taking the trouble to get the words right, and you couldn't presumably correct her. Yeah. So, but that made it quite interesting. You know, there was suddenly it's a woman, and it's all become deeply, deeply strange, and there's nowhere to go. Yeah. But it also sat alongside a big exhibition he did at the Tate. Yeah. Which it twinned with quite nicely.
I think that the idea of the unreliable narrator as well is really interesting, and there's the story that goes along with those films. You know, about the main character and his kind of sexual dalliances and his obsession with Rambo. It's sort of quite funny, isn't it?
You know, we were talking about truth and lies. And
what's true?
I mean, I don't think it's possible to write something now that's in the capsule of being pure fiction or else pure documentation. Yeah. They just bleed totally into each other. You start off. I mean, I found that with this Deakin book, because I've only got sort of limited material to use. Essentially, you've got the photographs, and you've got a series of stories and anecdotes that he always told, and the same ones come back a little bit different all the time, so that you're freed up to take whatever you can read psychically from the character and basically invent structures, which I think in the end feel truer than trying to do one or the other in a pure form.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point. When I was writing my novel, The Wall in the Head, it's a work of fiction, but there are aspects of a reality that I've walked through. There's a lot of characters walking through Ballardian dystopian landscapes in Berlin and Birmingham and other places, and I think. Yeah, for me, I think I love the way that you do that, Ian, as well. That blend of fact and fiction has really, really appealed to me. I love in
Well,
Hackney, that rose red empire as well. You're kind of talking about those stories. I read that book several times. There's so many things I wanted to ask you. If it was true and if it was not true. I love the idea.
Everything's true.
Yeah, it's just
nothing is real. Everything is true.
But then you hear about like the mole man, and you think, how can this guy be?
How
can
the
this
mole
guy
man
be
is true?
It's real. But you just think, how is it possible?
Is he? Because he,
how is it possible?
True. He himself was a complete fantasist. And the nice thing or interesting thing with the mole man is that so many people were drawn in. Oh wow, what a freak! It's got to be a great film, and they'd start to do something with him, and you realise it was madder and stranger than anything you could, and the relation between him and the filmmaker became so intense. Generally women just kind of backed off and said, I'm not doing this anymore. You begin to wonder what's in the tunnels. His wife and daughter disappeared. Oh no, we're not going anywhere near that. And then the strange thing that the house is bought by these two young YBA artists and is now a kind of David Adjaye block with aspects of the tunnel, a gothic thing, as a kind of gothic feature in your basement.
It's a very well. If people don't know this story. The mole man was this guy who lived in de Beauvoir town in Hackney and dug all these tunnels. Going under the street from his house and got in a lot of trouble because he was damaging the foundations of other people's buildings.
But in another culture, they'd have been taken up as artworks, so outsider art.
Yeah,
because it wasn't just that he dug tunnels; he embedded old fridges into the walls, and they were like strange sculptural artifacts. Yeah. And there were books and pornography and everything. It was a mad scheme. But you could have preserved it as a map of some kind of derangement that was going on in Hackney at the same time as people were digging out extremely expensive basements. That was perfectly okay. And now I read in the book Serious Money, which I was having to review, is that when they're digging out the basements in Kensington and Chelsea, they now leave the diggers in their own excavations rather than bring them out, because it's cheaper just to throw them away and leave them buried than it is to close off the street and bring in a heavy-duty crane to take them out.
Yeah, it's
so what's under there? What's under here?
Yeah, this is the thing, isn't it? The idea
can smell it.
Yeah,
there's you can actually smell this level of.
There was a strange tang in the air, wasn't there?
Yeah, forever, absolutely. It's like, I don't know what it is quite, but there's sort of landfill
smell,
dumps.
Yeah, it doesn't smell that great. Well, I don't. Actually,
the sewage, of course.
Well, this is quite worrying. I can see some black smoke coming from over there as well, which looks maybe like some kind of
that's it.
Fire, perhaps.
Thamesmead is on fire.
Oh dear.
This is it. It's apocalypse.
Yeah, everything.
So we're talking about Concrete Island, and there's all this stuff about. He sets his car on fire and he starts to set blankets on fire. And there's all these images of fire in Concrete Island.
There is. Combined
with looking at the sun going down, so you're looking out there to the west where there's tower blocks have come in. So it's almost like a projection onto Grenfell Tower. I mean, not that he's obviously predicting that, but there is a sense that this development is headlong and not properly validated, and that things are going to happen. Yeah. And he's got this psychodrama playing out, sort of, I think, as much like Shakespeare's Tempest as it is like Robinson Crusoe. Yeah. Because he's got a kind of Caliban figure, this strange acrobat tramp who's very strong and almost subhuman, and a Miranda, a woman, a sort of sprightly woman who goes off as a prostitute onto motorways at night. So
I wish Ballard was here today to kind of give us his take on, if he could have seen the pandemic, and he could have seen the
love riffing on this. But if you said to him, in Concrete Island, would you, and he's just shutting off. But if he's riffing freely on this landscape, I'm sure he'd be absolutely delighted.
Well, I think one of the things that appeals to me about Ballard is he sort of, we're looking at these houses now. Ballard would show us the inside of the house and maybe the violence that was happening inside, or the sadness, or the craziness.
But also he loves it.
Yeah,
he's not being satiric of it. He actually likes it. Yeah, I mean he incubates that sense of apocalypse. Yes, because he sees. I mean, he seems to be trapped, and I think it goes back to partly the
Well, it was the war,
camp
wasn't it?
in the war,
yeah.
and then secondly, moving from that to
Yeah.
sort of English public school
Yeah.
in Cheltenham, in Cambridge,
Yeah.
the Lees School in Cambridge. These two things are kind of prisons, and they involve huge elements of boredom. So for him, when he looked at the contemporary world, there was this microclimate, this layer of boredom, and it clamped society into an anomie. There was no engagement, and so you had to come up with a violent act, really, to break through into some kind of life again.
I think he shows us the violence of Englishness as well. I mean, we think of this bucolic landscape, but I guess our piece has come from, well, we're sitting on an old armaments factory. We were exporting.
His violence cooks very much among the middle classes, sort of the wealthy, half-comfortable architects and designers and whatever are brooding on this sort of psychotic behaviour. Whereas he doesn't really look into what happens with the actual people who have got working lives down here. Don't particularly interest him, I don't think, in the same way he's not interested in the older buildings of London or dealing with any of that history.
Yeah.
And also his ecology is kind of quite profound, in a sense that he knows all this is whimsical and that nature will just, when it's been abused, will wipe it all out.
Yeah, exactly. And however many years, whether it's 100 or 100,000, none of this will be here. None of us will be here. The land will have taken over again.
As well as, partly, I think he'd love this park because he's got such a love of painters like Delvaux and de Chirico. This sense of these stripped dream landscapes with nothing really happening, and something would happen here. So, if he was around, I'd have taken some photos here and sent them to him. And he kind of, he doesn't. You do it, but he doesn't need it. He knows it. Essentially, I felt it's interesting to do it when he wasn't very well to send him stuff, but he kind of knows it all, and he seemed to have plotted everything he was doing right through to the end. So the last book just gives you the real story behind all the others.
Yeah, there was obviously
perfect career. He wrote the same book over and over in so many different ways.
I
think we all do.
We all do that?
I don't know if we all do. I do. I know he does.
Fragment 2.
There's obviously a very very English sensibility to Ballard, but one of the things I wonder about is how there's almost a link to a kind of French avant-garde. I see,
with him, yeah.
I see that, and I see that with you and with Jonathan Meades and with so many others as well, like the idea of the flaneur, and you wrote about Godard, didn't you, Iain?
Oh yeah, a lot. But Ballard loved the French avant-garde cinema. I grew up with that. One of his favourite writers was Genet.
Yeah.
So yes, because it was subversive culture when he was a student, that was where you would look to, and
Keeler's always talking about Rambo.
Yes, very much.
Yeah. And the word flaneur, we don't really have a kind of English translation for that, but I always feel like there's a kind of French influence, isn't there, in our
I've
avant-garde.
always never been very comfortable with the flaneur thing. The idea it's like it belonged to a certain period of decadence. It's to do with being able or free just to kind of roam in the shopping malls and centres of the city and look at things in windows and all that, and it's all very lazy and decorous. Whereas I think there's this thing, a fuguer, who's like you're trapped in this fugue of mad walking. You're off for truly epic journeys. What we did this afternoon is not flaneuring. We were in something much crazier than that.
Yes.
It's like going off-piste.
We were on the roundabouts.
You might start as a flaneur in
end up as a
gentlemanly environs of the Elizabeth line, and then within 2 minutes you're into... Where's this one from?
This is a British Airways plane. Who knows where that's from? Maybe Berlin or Frankfurt.
A rare British Airways plane.
Yeah.
It's like
it's not been cancelled.
Been a bird spotter.
Should we walk a little more in?
Let's go to the top. Yeah.
Let's go up to the top. What did I want to ask you? There was one thing I wanted to ask you, Iain. A lot of you know, when I'm doing these conversations, I ask people about their park memories.
Yes.
And for you, I wonder if it's a little different because you worked in parks, didn't you?
I did, but that was kind of, you know, it's in my early adulthood, really. But my original park memory would be as a child, you know, in Wales. I grew up in a kind of coal mining town called Maesteg, but there was a wonderful park which had elements of this. It had kind of formal bits,
Right.
but it had lots of wilderness and wild wood, and that was such a landscape just to be able to go. And in those days,
Yeah.
you know, when you were 7 or 8, there was no problem about going off and roaming about these kids in places that would, you know, now you'd be nervous and panicking about your kids doing it.
And I think that's a very, very good point. I remember when I was a kid as well, my parents said, come back for your tea at 5 o'clock
That's right.
and just do what you want. And I think that's, you know, what's probably
that's
made
what
me...
started me off.
Yeah.
There was a post-industrial landscape
Yeah.
of abandoned railways. You actually walk through railway tunnels and hope nothing was coming. And there were flag heaps on the edges of the coal mines looked like this and were beginning to be grown over. And that was the thing of being out there exploring all day long.
Yeah.
And then later, obviously, in my early 20s, I became a parks gardener just down there. And that's the speed of history, is that I was driving a tractor around what is the Canary Wharf.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that long ago.
Yeah.
This is only in the 1970s.
So there was a park on that place, or was that...
I don't know if it was that exact, but I mean, in the general area, there was so much just
The Isle of
grassland
Dogs, yeah.
and abandoned stuff because the docks had gone and failed, and they hadn't started to build. So we used to drive the tractor down from the sheds, which were sort of further up, and come down to the Isle of Dogs and spend a nice afternoon with tractors behind me.
Yeah.
And then next day you'd be in the Hawksmoor churches.
Yes.
And this is reminding me of that, you know, the sense being in those Hawksmoor churches and seeing how they linked up with each other and made patterns and designs. And where we are now is sort of seemingly something else. That's because of the planes we're on this flight path.
We're right under
we're in the eye of London.
We really are, exactly.
So
There's almost the shape of it kind of reminds me of the Millennium Dome a little as well, which I think we can probably see in
really, this is stunning.
the distance.
That's Barking Creek.
So yeah, over on our right, so we're on top of this big hill now, and you actually get a very, very good panoramic view. Another plane, British Airways plane landing at London City Airport.
Is this going to the city airport, or does it go up the Thames to...
City, yeah.
Because the Heathrow ones do follow down the Thames.
They do, yeah. Those small Embraer planes are the ones you get at City Airport.
Germans called the Thames Seeschlange, or the sea serpent.
The sea serpent?
Because in the war, you know, so use the Thames as a thing for bombing raids.
Right.
Sort of follow in.
They can follow it.
All this would have been up in flame.
Fragment 3.
Iain, do you think it's important for a writer to have had experiences and have things that you can draw on rather than just sitting there and on your desk? You always.
I suppose it depends who you are. But for an ordinary human, I think to have years of experience every year you bank is valuable, really valuable.
Yeah.
And to have that kind of starry Martin Amis type career where you come straight out of university and you write some smart book and then you're in the system and you're never going to have more of a job than as a literary editor or a creative writing teacher.
Yeah.
That's it. And then it becomes very self-conscious, and I don't think there's a lot of life in it. So I prefer people who've had the sort of experiences that people like Ballard had, or someone like Mike Moorcock, who we haven't mentioned, who started doing this about 15. You know, he's out there editing Tarzan comics, or Alan Moore,
yeah,
who had strange jobs on motorways. He worked in Milton Keynes.
What was Alan Moore's job on the?
He was some kind of, I don't know what he was. He was in the planning offices or whatever in Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then he's obviously started doing his own comics and then whatever, and wait until he's writing huge epic novels. But those kind of writers have enormous life. a lot of varied experiences before they start to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's about having those experiences and meeting those people. I love a Jonathan Mead's anecdote when he's talking about these artists and musicians and actors that he's met, and also we've gone to a bar, or he's gone to a. I love Jonathan talks about things like slaughterhouses or rubbish tips or those kind of things as well. Like I feel like you need to see the breadth of humanity and the breadth of the world, and to walk around the roundabout and see the McDonald's, and not just kind of exist in this.
Well, I think it's harder to, again, from the 60s point of view, I could go out any morning I wanted to, and I'd get a job cutting the grass in here or something, and this would be really interesting. And you'd meet the old boys who'd been doing it for 20 years, 50 years, and you'd get all their stories, work in Truman's Brewery, see how the culture of the pub works, the mechanics of the brewing, the part of the brewery in the system of the city, and then happily you could walk away after a while. You're not stuck in it for life. And so gradually accumulated a lot of insight into things that happen within these buildings. What's it like to work in one of those retail park factories? Because I've walked along the Thames here and gone into those places, and they don't know where they are. So I was walking with Anna, my wife, down the whole Thames, and we went to one bit further down near Erith, and said, "Oh, can you tell us where the Thames is?" And I said, "What's that?" So it's a big, river thing.
It's wet.
It's a river there's a bridge. There's a QE2. Oh, he said, the bridge. Yeah, I think there's a bridge. It's like 50 yards further. The other side of this block was the Thames and the QE2 bridge. And they came in, they drove in, they stopped, they went into the factory in the dark. They kind of sat there all day. They had meals and drank and had cups of tea, and then they got in the car and went home again. They didn't know where they were, literally at all. And that's frightening.
Yeah. It's often the way with these kind of liminal landscapes, isn't it? You're kind of
now
very.
It's on your phone, isn't it? So you kind of know, or it knows where you are.
Someone knows at some point. Also, I mean, we're both writers. I passionately believe in the power of words to, tell these stories, and in their emotive power and their artistic power. But I don't know if it sounds too much of a basic question, but what was it about writing for you, Iain? What was it about words that you could have maybe done music or art or
well, I couldn't.
I couldn't. It was the only thing you could do.
I couldn't do anything else.
Couldn't do anything else.
That's basically it. It took me a while to kind of. The only two things I could do when I was in school was write strange stories. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes they were thought to be ridiculous or grotesque, whatever. It wasn't always popular, but I kind of could just do it. Or playing rugby, and that was it. And the rest of it. So,
like
it wasn't
kind of Frank, like a kind of Frank Machin character.
Oh, not quite, but yeah. Wasn't big enough for that. But essentially, that's how it went. So, but I kind of was able to accumulate the experiences of all kinds of writing, by doing plays and lots of bits of films. Film reviews and journalism. Cinema was the other thing that was very much a passion for me. And then the question of having to make a living. So, either you do some form of teaching, or you're out in the world scratching about as a labourer.
Yeah.
Until luckily I hit this book dealing thing by accident of just being left some books. and tried to sell them. And I saw it was absolutely impossible to take books into shops and get any money. I knew what they were worth, and they would give you nothing. So I got a stall, and suddenly they were all going, and that was it. And I did that for years, and that was great. I met some really interesting people, learnt an awful lot.
Yeah.
I must say.
Yeah.
The downside is you're a free psychiatrist. You're trapped.
People ask you.
These famed people, these
Asking
kind
for
of
your
madmen
advice,
come and stand there for hours and hours, and they don't ask you anything. They tell you. They tell you. Sometimes it's interesting.
Well, that makes me think of my favourite part of whenever I do book talk, and it's either the question is in two parts, or it's more of a comment than a question.
Yeah. Well,
people are never really asking; they're always kind of telling
very
you.
Few people ask a real question.
Yeah, telling you something, aren't they? But I think, I mean, your writing stood out to me, Iain, when I was young, in the way that Jonathan Meads did, and in the way that I loved the way Chris Morris played with language as well. The playfulness, the inventiveness, the kind of fire that was in there really spoke to me. You can read any piece of text, and actually, language is there to be manipulated and to be experimented with, and to be.
But, that's interesting, because when I first started to read Ballard in the 60s, the language was so plain and so stripped down. I didn't get it in the same way that you're reading William Burroughs or Joyce or something. The language is phenomenally active and rich. It's doing all kinds of things. But Ballard never did that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely penny plain. But as time's gone on, I've appreciated how clever that is, and how beautifully managed it is. So minimalist.
Yeah.
And I think Chris Pettit's books are written somewhat similarly to Ballard's, in that he's got a very spare style.
Yeah. There's obviously different kinds of.
But I like writers who really do the business of writing.
Yeah.
It's an active act, like painting. It's not just a form of transcription or collection.
Well, language is constantly evolving as well, isn't it? Which always intrigues me.
Yeah.
When you
a lot of books now seem to be almost written by program, or machine. You could almost see how they're manipulated.
Yeah.
I think it will come even more so.
Yeah. Well, we feel like we can automate almost everything. Maybe we could have robotic writers.
I'm sure you could already.
Maybe
you could do a little description of the mounds and coming out here, and then you press a program that gives you the Ballard version of it. You press a program that gives you the Beckett version of it. Existential comedy. And so
the
on
Iain
and so
Sinclair
on.
version.
Very easy to do.
Yeah.
I'm sure that can be done.
Yeah. Maybe in 20 years' time we'll be out on our ears, Iain.
I think we'll be content providers. Or harvesters.
Yeah.
We'll go around with that thing and just sort of hoover up some stuff for a machine or a corporation.
Yeah. And then plug it in.
There'll be an algorithm to say what people really want. So whatever is most wanted of an expedition there will be part of the story.
Yeah.
You're only doing a kind of wallpaper in the background.
Yeah.
I don't have to be fagged to come all the way down here and find it.
That's the title of one of Stuart Lee's shows, isn't it? Content Provider. He's a very big Iain Sinclair fan, as I think we were saying earlier.
I love his diatribes in the Observer. It's him in it. I read it. It's like a riff, obviously. He's bright guy.
Yeah.
And he loves his sort of Gothic literature.
Yes. As I said, I was talking to Michael Cumming about him and Stuart Lee's film King Rocco, and he's talking about the Nightingales and about Nick Monroe's King Kong statue, which has now been recreated in Birmingham in a strange kind of rebirth. of that.
Birmingham, yes, I remember the film very well.
Yeah.
What a thing! I couldn't imagine how it was commissioned.
I think the thing was that it wasn't. I think
It wasn't commissioned.
No, I think they just went and made it on a shoestring, and then managed to flog it. And I think that's the thing. I love things like that. I feel like we need more of them, and I think maybe people are a bit overcautious with commissioning.
I don't want it in that park. Because, I mean, you could put one on the top of the hill easily.
Yes.
But the nice thing about that park is it's got no content. We're content strippers.
Yeah.
There's been this huge excavation. It's something. These are symbols of something.
Yeah.
But luckily they don't even attract people. But you can take photos of it. So when you're promoting Thamesmead,
there's
this lovely park.
There's the mounds.
And great viewing platform.
Yeah.
But there's no lift. It's not like this terrible disaster of one they did in Hyde Park Corner. They built some
the mound.
Awful mound structure.
I never saw that, but
neither did I. Neither did anybody else.
No, the photos looked
crap.
looked appalling, didn't it? It was basically some scaffolding with some kind of grassy edge.
And the point of this one is that the great thing about it is you have to really walk out through all sorts of strange and varied landscapes to get to it.
You do indeed.
You can't just stroll up in there's no river trip that's stopping there.
Maybe we could start one. We could start the river.
I'm sort of reluctant to do this because then we're going to get people coming. Someone might listen to it and think, "Oh God, I've got to go down."
We'll keep the location secret. But we talked a little bit about the psychic idea as well, and you were talking about the kind of sparseness, the emptiness of that place here. And do you kind of feel like we're by the river now? Yeah,
by the river because look at that, all strange
seaweed in the river. Yeah.
I don't know about you, but the sheer just the fact of the Thames after all this flim-flam that we've been through, you can do whatever you like on that landscape. You can move in set after set after set, but you hit this river and suddenly it all stops. It's serious.
Yeah.
And it will kill you in a minute.
Yeah.
And it's broad. You're divided. The two shores are divided. The weight of everything London is rippling in that water. So it's wonderful. That's why they use it as a marketing tool for all the new blocks of flats. There are no tower blocks further back. There's sort of suburban villages are hidden in a hinterland between the prison and the park, and then the ones they actually erect to sell are here. And look, that's Ballard, the architect's building at the top. The penthouse of that is exactly like high rise, where the boss has his kingdom at the top.
Yeah.
And in fact, we did a radio program about high rise way back, and we were given two tower blocks, I think, behind that red one there, to use to make the program because nobody was moving in to live there. They said, the sort of BBC approached them, said, can we have one flat? I said, you can have the whole building. No, there's nobody here. So we made this radio program talking about high rise in that, which was the nearest thing you could come to the actual Ballard thing, because the Canary Wharf is not, obviously not the same.
Yeah.
Although that's where it would have been in his theoretical projection.
And we can see the Woolwich ferry over here, which is
I love the Woolwich
ferry. One of the best free things you can do in London, going across the river on that ferry. It feels very, very retro.
It's sad from my point of view because you had the ferry, then you had the old Woolwich station, which is just by the ferry.
Yeah. So
you could get on the train there and go circling quietly back to Hackney. And there is still a little park nearby.
Yeah. Which
is where the Princess Alice was coming in to tie up when it was hit by the drunken collier boat going upstream and chopped in half. And
anyone who's like me and Iain, old enough to remember Silverlink trains, will be familiar with the old What's this?
I don't know, nothing.
We've got a kind of anchor thing
Care
here.
bag on.
Do you often
This is quite a distinguished piece of sculpture in comparison with the actual one that they've put in front of Woolwich Station.
Which is just a kind of
just as a
thing
tie
from,
up.
tying up boats,
but
right?
it's functional, but it's beautiful.
Yeah. Do you often look at things like graffiti? Do they
Always,
take your eye? Yeah.
I scan them and I kind of collect books of photographs of ones that are sort of pertinent to the period in interesting ways.
Yeah.
It's a history.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Park Date. There's lots more where that came from, and there'll be more in the future as well. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review, good or bad, make them funny. I'll be reading out the best ones, and there'll be a prize for the one that makes me laugh the most. Name check some trees in your reviews and leave them wherever you get your podcasts from. Check out our website, parkdate.co.uk, and if you see me walking around in a park, come and say hello. I think that was the sound of someone sneezing. Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Fragment 1. Fragment 2. Fragment 3. Fragment 4. Fragment 5. Fragment 6. Fragment 7. Fragment 8. Fragment 9. Fragment 10.